With the general buy in most senior sports this weekend, I thought it was a great opportunity to touch base with the man who brought us the story of the Warren Rugby Club. Theo Clark runs his own media company in the city, but still calls Warren, the famous cotton and sheep farming town on the Macquarie, his home away from home. Theo's DVD, From an Ace to a Puma, featured in our tribute to the Warren Premiership teams of the 1980s last week. Just one part of the story Theo put together for the 60th anniversary 2 years ago.
There's a special spirit in country rugby, a magical quality that sets it apart, where players and supporters are prepared to travel vast distances just to get their weekly rugby fix, where you play hard and celebrate hard, win, lose or draw.
Theo joins me now. Theo, thank you so much for your commitment to researching, writing and filming such a wonderful piece of history.
Yes, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much for having me.
Look, it's become part of our program over the last couple of years since Greg Whiteley introduced us to the fact that A, Warren was having their 60th anniversary, and B, that you had taken on production of the story. A labour of love, I imagine.
Oh, it was. I'm a filmmaker, but I'd prefer to say that I'm a video storyteller, really. And this just had all the elements of the great story, the landscape, the people, the music out there. You know, we were able to bring it all together. It was wonderful.
You were able to capture the real essence of the club. You went right back to day one. There were some people who played in the Warren Pumas back in 1954 when the club was formed, and they had a white Guernsey with an ace of clubs on it. That must have been in itself a spine-chilling experience for you.
It was. I remember Ian McKay had an original jersey there. Now, I think it had been a black jersey, but it had faded so much with time and with the love of it. That's absolutely right, yeah.
Theo, how did you get involved in this? What is your connection to the Warren community?
Yeah, I've got family in the district. My sister has married a farmer out there at Warren, and that brought me out there really to film the story. He had come to Sydney a few years ago, and he had seen a video I'd done for the Lane Cove Rugby Club, which we launched at the Longueville Bowling Club, and we had a few hundred people there. And he saw a story, not about a club, but about the mateship and the spirit behind it, and it was a story about growing up in Sydney. And he thought, I just wish we could have that for my club. So the idea rattled around in his head for a while, and then he convinced the others to get it going.
So where was your starting point? Obviously those pioneers, and sadly a couple of those have passed since the DVD was made. What else did you do? How did you plot the DVD?
Yeah, we were lucky that several of the pioneers were still around and very willing to be involved. They've never lost their commitment to the club. I remember starting on Easter Sunday at the Marthaguy Hall. There was quite a gathering there, and a lot of bold claims were made about the, all the wallabies you'd had and all of this sort of business.
Right.
So that set me on the right track anyway. And the great thing about working in the bush is you have these long roads to plan your next turn in the story. So I was driving off that Dubbo Road, and on the radio or the CD player came Greg Storer singing When I Was a Boy, which is a wonderful song about growing up in the bush. And I thought, well, that's what we need for our story. So he's a farmer out at Warren. That's how that came about. The story grew. I'd ask old-timers about such and such a player, and they'd say, well, he came out just after the All Blacks came out. And I'd say, the All Blacks came to Warren, tell me more. And then, of course, at the Warren Historical Society, they had a wonderful film of the All Blacks doing the haka at Victoria Oval there. And I just knew that these elements were coming together for a great story.
Theo Clark is our guest this morning on Sports Saturday. He's the man responsible, From an Ace to a Puma, 60 years of the Warren Rugby Club, a DVD that we've heard little pieces of and spoken about with Greg Whiteley extensively over the last couple of years. It was ironic that last week when we played that little piece about the All Blacks coming to Nevertire, which was dry and dusty and barren at the time that they came, that rain was pouring down in Warren and Nevertire.
Yeah, well, that was so much a part of the story. I'm from the city, playing it for city friends. They were amazed at the idea of driving 350 kilometres for a Saturday match. And the coaches having to, check around whether anyone had injured themselves or could make it to the game for all sorts of reasons. And so the floods, the comradeship that having a footy club through the droughts and floods, was the essence of the story.
And last week, John Azar spoke to us because he was coaching the teams in the 1980s that went through premierships. He said that the club has such a proud record that in their 62 years, they've never forfeited a first-grade game.
Yep, that statistic amazed Nick Farr-Jones and Gordon Bray and a few people. They really saluted the club for that statistic. It's very impressive.
And to have those two men that you mentioned, a World Cup winning captain and ambassador for rugby, and of course the voice of rugby, both involved with the DVD, adds even more lustre.
Absolutely, yeah. And who knows, they could have been calling John Azar, because I'm told that he's the best centre never to have played for Australia. So, a season at Warren probably kept him from the Wallabies.
And it's interesting, I've said a couple of times, whilst it focuses on Warren and the Warren people and the Warren Club, it's a bit of an everyman story that could be told of so many communities, because it tells about people who were working on a farm, or a bloke like John White from Yeovil, who featured playing against the All Blacks, could do their Monday to Friday work and then go off and represent Australia.
That's right. And people forget how much of a feeder country rugby was for the Wallabies. It really had a golden age that a lot of Warren officials were involved with, but certainly not limited to Warren.
I love the yarn that you have in there about one of the OBrien boys. There were probably more than one who would team up. It was almost like a car relay. He'd come from the foot of the Warrumbungle Mountains and meet up with some other guys, and then they'd get in their car and head off over to training and off to matches.
Yep, Greg O'Brien there in Galaganbone. He was telling the story of just the effort people went to come to training. But you remind me there of, I think the best review I got was not so much every man, but every woman's take, because a farmer's wife, now the clubs, as you know, are run by the women volunteering in the background. It just couldn't happen without that. But some rugby wives are not so interested, it must be said. So one of the long-term players' wives had finally sat down and watched this show that her farming husband had said, "Oh, it's great, you've got to see the rugby." And she thought, "Oh, how dull." So she sat down, she watched it, and she just said at the end, "Okay, I get it now." And he didn't have to explain the next time. He took off for the rugby.
Theo, you mentioned that you did something with Lane Cove, and just having a look online, you've done plenty of different DVDs telling the story. It's something that I reckon a lot of people across our listening area might like to be involved with. Coonamble this year, Nyngan this year are both celebrating their 60th anniversary. If somebody wanted to put a video or DVD like this, how would they go about connecting with you to be able to do that?
Yeah, well, any inquiries are welcome. You can go obviously via my website, or I call myself Theo Clark Media, so I'm easily found. But then it's a question of us sitting down with the dedicated people of the club and the people that know where the great stories are. And it takes time. I'd be trawling through the archives and the libraries and really sitting down with people for a good long yarn and coming back and forth, and we'd follow the new guys around for the season and that sort of thing. So there'd be many elements to pull together, but it all starts with just a simple chat.
I said you had half a dozen players from that very first period, and sadly a couple of those have passed away, and that is one of the factors that we need to get hold of now. People are ageing, and if they wish to capture their histories, it needs to be done. People have got photos. Some people have got those golden scraps like you were able to pick up of the All Blacks in Warren.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of your listeners will know Brian Anderson, what a lovely gentleman he was from Dubbo, and all of those memories. It's so clear in the head, and they're ready to tell a story. It's a reflective time of life. And the way that rugby in the Western Plains went was that in the 50s we had the wool boom, we had all of the labour. It was a great time for starting clubs. And that generation, they're still here. I always say to people, now's the time. We've got to get that heritage.
And I think there are a lot of people around that have the capacity to do this. Now, when I was a kid at school, you might have to do a story on your family, but it was all written. These days, with a mobile phone, you can actually go and sit with Pop, or you can go and sit with the old bloke down the road who did whatever it was, whether he played league or union or cricket or was just a part of something within the community. Can you take that tape and build that into your programs?
Absolutely. They're a real patchwork. To tell a real story, you want pictures, but you are getting people in their native habitat, feeling comfortable, bringing out their personality, and it's so precious if you get it right. And that can happen, especially if it's a son talking to a father, a grandfather. That's a great way to do it. And these days, you bring it together with the right images, the right footage, with a bit of research. It's a great way to do it, yeah.
Well, you've done it extraordinarily well in From an Ace to a Puma. 60 years of the Warren Rugby Club. I know that Greg Whiteley has copies of that, and the Warren Rugby Club, or no doubt they could contact you directly at Theo Clark Media if people wanted to get that. But if people also wanted to, as I said, Canamble and Ningen, and there are so many other wonderful stories around, but people need to get on the front foot, so maybe you could be getting some calls in the next few weeks.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, I've got this wonderful footage from Ningen's point of view of their 2014 grand final and all sorts of things in the archives already, so it's a great treasure trove for the Western Plains for rugby.
That was actually an anticlimax for Warren, wasn't it? Because their 60th anniversary was going to be capped off. They knocked Canamble off in the semi-final and they were going to take the title, but Ningen Bulls were too good for the Pumas.
Absolutely, but that's footy, and half the team thought, well, I guess I better give up now. And they all signed up for the next season. So, there's a silver lining on every cloud.
Absolutely. And Theo, you have helped us all to be a part of that and to share in that wonderful silver lining of rugby union in Warren. But I know that you have other DVDs and other projects, and I'd love to point people in the direction of your Facebook page to have a look at that, and maybe an interest, more than an interest, an activity, a get off their backside and get it done.
Absolutely. A ghost town makes a great video. A grandfather with a war story, it's so precious. You're absolutely right.
I'm going down to the old Cove. I can't wait, I'm a Puma man. I'm out of my skin when I hit the ground right. It's like I'm a newborn man. I'm going down to the old Cove. I can't wait, I'm a Saturday man. Out of my skin when I hit the ground right. It's like I'm a newborn man. Ace of clubs, I've heard them say, seems like just yesterday.